Coming up on a brand new episode of Wonder Room, the playoffs creep ever closer and the action burns ever hotter. Rose Tower finds themselves in a dogfight against Sky Pillar at the top of the standings, but also having to deal with Hau'oli under new management? Anastar, Big Bluff, and Kitakami all looking to move up in the Ruby League standings. Who emerges victorious in the showdowns between wildcard contenders? The wildcard races, the trade deadline, a big surprise, which will prove to be the craziest. Hold on to your hats and check those stats. Week 4 edition of Wonder Room starts now. Hello everyone and welcome back to Wonder Room. I'm your host, King Vasser. We've got another exciting episode waiting for us. Today we are heading into the final 2 weeks of the regular season. Just 8 sets separate our competitors from regular season and postseason play, and there's so much still up for grabs. We got a lot to talk about, including maybe the craziest week of free agency and trades in NWBA history. But before we get into anything, we have a massive announcement to make. And that announcement is that the Hau'oli Hydras will unfortunately be suspending operations for the remainder of the season. Danchi has a lot on his plate as a content creator and as someone going through summer school and many other projects, and they just did not have the time to continue to play in the NWBA. It's very unfortunate to see. Happens about once a season. We want to thank Danchi for his time, gave us a good effort, the best that he could in the first 2 weeks of the season, but unfortunately it seems like for the remainder of season 8 we'll only be operating with 50. This can only be so bad. Hello? Yeah. Once again, you called me right in the middle of me talking about it. What's the deal? Oh, well, that's great news. So, who's gonna step in then, if we can actually do that? I'm sorry, you said who? No, your eyes and ears do not deceive you. The notorious Keg FM, legendary shitposter, and Season 6 NWBA champion returns to the NWBA to take over for Dancy and become the new interim GM of the Hau'oli Hydras. 2 seasons of prior NWBA experience, career record of 14-30, winning percentage just short of 320. Do not let that record fool you. When the ball gets rolling, Keg can hang with anybody in NWBA history. There's a reason he won the Season 6 championship after all. So while the Hau'oli Hydras face a very tall task to try to salvage the rest of their season, if anybody can pull it off, it's the guy that took a 9-13 record and flipped that into a championship win. So there you have it, folks. We will in fact be operating with 16 teams for the remainder of the season, barring any additional issues, thanks to Keg's appearance. And he will get his hands dirty very quickly. One of the 4 sets we have to showcase today, as per usual. Once again, it was a Ruby League sweep. Not to say that the Ruby League is more exciting than the Sapphire, but in week 4, Ruby League definitely put together some really fascinating matches. Rose Tower versus Sky Pillar, 2 top Ruby League teams going head-to-head on Versus Seeker. This was a long, drawn-out affair, but you wouldn't be able to tell right out the gate. Como on turn 3 going straight for that Clanker Soul throat spray tech. Presses the Aura Sphere, but Taylor does have that Chapel Berry locked and loaded, so Como is only able to take this thing down after going down to 25%. We move to turn 12, Sylveon, calm minding up, reads the taunt, gets off a Hyper Voice, and easily lives the acrobatics from the Citrus Berry Thunderous to go up 6-4. But here is the big key for Rose Tower. Substitute Latios not only with Calm Mind, but enough physical defense to be able to take a foul play from an Umbreon without breaking the sub. Now you see that the Umbreon has its own tricks in the back light screen, and then on the second Calm Mind reveals Roar. So you see what the win condition is for Rose Tower. How would they be able to get there? Turn 27, Como goes down to a Mesprit Dazzling Gleam after getting off some Clanging Scales damage. And then we move forward all the way to turn 33 where Mesprit goes for that Healing Wish to keep something in the back. And then on turn 39, Dragapult reveals itself as Screen, so Skypillar sacks Sylveon to the rocks to bring in Scarf Azelf, which Terra Fairies, hits the Dazzling Gleam, and takes out the Dragapult to make it 4-2. And then on turn 51, Iron Hands comes in behind a screen to take care of Tentacruel. And while it does get poisoned by a Sludge Bomb, it's going to be able to take out Tentacruel and leave Latios all by its lonesome. So Latios tries to sub up in front of this thing, but a Drain Punch will easily pop the sub and keep Iron Hands relatively healthy. So Latios is going to have to start hitting this thing and fast. Iron Hands, a second Drain Punch gets Latios down to 28%. Before Latios picks up the kill with the Psyshock on turn 55, but at just 40%, that is not enough to take an Azelf Psyshock, and so Skypillar takes the first game of the set. Game 2, the leads Iron Hands and a Klefki that was the swap for Thunder's Eye, which immediately goes for the Calm Mind, but great read from the Iron Hands, immediately going for the Earthquake, proccing the Weakness Policy, and living the stored power thanks to that AV before taking out Klefki with a Heavy Slam. Turn 6, Sylveon trying to get some stuff going again, but the Ting Lu does have Heavy Slam as coverage, and so Sylveon's going to go down to make this an early 5-5. We move to turn 9, Iron Hand comes in on Latios, Calm Minding up, and unfortunately, after dealing with that Klefki, Iron Hand just doesn't have the HP to really stand in front of Latios, so it goes down. And then on turn 14, you see the Manaphy come in, which was the swap for Como, and Skypillar reveals a nasty trick after the Psyshock. It's hard swap Manaphy to take the Latios boost. And so they're going to be able to turn the tables here on Rose Tower. Team got to get sacked to a Manaphy Surf. But Rose Tower has a trick of their own. Payapa Berry Tentacruel armed with Haze. So we're going to be here for quite a while. Both teams unveiling some crazy counterplay to each other. On turn 41, Clodsire gets off a crucial Toxic on the Latios. So you're thinking from this point on, it's just a matter of time before Skypillar is able to take the set. Manaphy goes down to a Mesprit Psychic Noise on turn 48, which allows Azelf to come in, gets off good damage with a U-turn, but remember, Mesprit has Healing Wish, and so it's going to be able to go into Latios, get rid of that Toxic, and so it's going to be another long drawn-out affair. On turn 63, big mistake from Skypillar, bringing in Azelf on a Tentacle Sludge Bomb, which does poison, which means that Azelf only has one turn left after the KO to do anything. Rose Tower takes advantage of this, lets Dragapult go down to a Clodsire EQ, knowing that it can't get roared out, it won't get toxic because it's faster than Clod, and it's only a matter of time before the Latios gets up to +6, takes care of the Umbreon. Azelf is able to pop the sub, but nowhere near enough to take down Latios, so it goes down, and Rose Tower is able to expertly navigate their way to a Game 2 victory to take this to the final game. Game 3, Comfey was the swap for Klefki, also a Calm Minder, but this time a more defensive variant, and you see, because Iron Hands' Heavy Slam is only doing 42%, and Drain Kiss is getting back enough HP that Comfey is going to be able to stick around for quite some time. So Iron Hands, again, armed with that AV, is able to do decent damage, but on turn 8, Comfey reveals that it's also stored power, so Iron Hands goes down for Rose Tower to take the early Game 3 lead. Manaphy comes in, and it is faster than the Comfey, so it gets off the Heart Swap, which means that Rose Tower is going to have to sack something in retaliation. So in comes the Pult, takes the Surf, and is able to get up a Light Screen before it goes down to an Alluring Voice. A few more turns later, we get to turn 14. Comfey and Decidueye are both swapped in. Comfey once again going for its Calm Mind sweeping stuff. Decidueye presses Poltergeist, does a nice 40%, but then reveals on turn 16 that it's actually Swords Dance. So Comfey only does about 28% because it's not armed to hit things hard, but the Decidueye is, so it pops the Comfey. Ting-Lu comes in, doubles into Mesprit to bait the Leaf Blade, which does come out. You see it does 47% to Mesprit. So Mesprit decides to lock Decidueye into Leaf Blade. Seeing how dire things are, this team can't really stand in front of a +2 Decidueye. So Mesprit healing wishes out into Latios, trying to find some way to win this game back. The critical hit Leaf Blade does 50%. Latios goes for the Terra knowing the Poltergeist is coming, but the Psyshock isn't doing nearly enough, and the Poltergeist does land, taking out Latios, and that is the set right then and there. And so Sky Pillar, with a massive win on versus Seeker, Decidueye comes in to save the day, 4 KOs and an assist in a single game. Sky Pillar moves to 7-5, Rose Tower dropping to 8-4 on the season. Rose Tower versus Hau'oli, Keg's first game as the GM of the Hydras, and it would take a while before things really got going in the first game of this set. Turn 14, Clefable starts calm minding up in front of a Dragapult, but the Tentacle reveals that it has Haze on turn 16 and then gets off a boatload of damage on turn 17. Unfortunately, the Clef does have Wish, so things are going to be a little bit more complicated than they appear. T-Tar comes in on a Sludge Bomb, but unfortunately gets poisoned. So Tentacool, taking advantage of that, go ahead and flip turns out into Terrakion. And T-Tar gets off the knockoff, which does remove the Scarf, but also gives Terrakion that +1 thanks to the Justified boost. So Rotom Heat, having been very chipped down by Dragapult, has to come in. And while it's able to block the EQ, it's not going to block the CC from taking something off the map for the first KO of the game. Soundstone comes in, lives the Rock Slide, and gets the KO in revenge with the Psychic Fangs. And you see that the Soundstone is not in fact Sand Rush, it is Fluffy. That Shadow Snake is going to come through and do just enough chip to Dragapult for the Sand to take care of it after going down to a Shadow Ball. So Latios and Excadrill come in after the KOs. Latios has to pivot out into Skarm. Excadrill goes for the SD, but this is a Skarmory we're talking about, so it easily takes the Iron Head and gets the KO right back with the Body Press to give Rose Tower a 4-3 lead. Turn 26, Tentacruel comes in, Keldeo flip turns out, pops a Citrus Berry from Tent, but because of all that prior damage, T-Tar is basically getting sacked thanks to that Spike and the Poison, which brings in Clef, which is going to take half from the Sludge Bomb, and crucially goes for a Wish instead of trying to get the KO on Tentacle, so it's going down to a second Sludge Bomb, and that is going to be the game one after a forfeit from Hau'oli's side. We move to game 2, T-Tar and Drill the leads, and you see a certified Keg Classic Focus Punch T-Tar. Unfortunately, Cherry immediately goes for the Ruination, breaking T-Tar's focus. And so Hau'oli has to settle for getting up rocks and knocking the Ting-Lu Citrus Berry before T-Tar goes down very early in game 2. Turn 7, Polt U-turns out on Clef into said Ting-Lu. And you see Calm Mind come out from Clefable, trying to get some progress done. Moonblast not enough to KO the Ting-Lu, which does get off the Whirlwind, but unfortunately it draws Keldeo, which is able to flip turn out to pick up the KO to even the game at 5-5. Houndstone and Pulp come in, and Houndstone takes a lot from the Shadow Ball, but gets off a Pain Split. So Dragapult's gonna have to leave, knowing that a Shadow Sneak can take it off the map. But here's the thing, Skarmory doesn't want to deal with the Houndstone either because of that Pain Split, and so as a result, Rose Tower makes a conscious decision, lets Dragapult go to the Shadow Sneak. It was already burned from Rotom, which allows it to bring in Latios to pick up the KO with the Surf. So Rotom Heat comes in, it's Scarf, so Terrakion has to come in, Latios scared out, Rotom Volt switches into Keldeo, which is able to live the Terrakion CC before picking up a KO in retaliation with the Surf. So Latios comes in, gonna have to get another KO in retaliation, but it's gonna take a little bit of chip from the Vacuum Wave before taking on Keldeo with a Psychic Noise. Rotom Heat comes back in comes Tentacruel, but crucially, Hau'oli clicks Overheat instead of Volt Switch, so that means Tentacruel is going to be able to get off a flip turn on the Excadrill, which does proc the red card, but that just means that Latios is able to come in armed with Recover, and you see that Excadrill is Sand Rush, so it's not able to hit EQ and use that Mold Breaker, and as a result, it's going to go down to a Surf after not doing nearly enough damage with the next Scissors. Scarlet comes in on the Rotom Heat to get sacked to the Overheat, and it's 2-2 heading into the final turns of the second game. Rotom Heat, knowing that its Choice Lock actually goes for a Terra Steel, knowing that Tentacruel can't get off the Sludge Bomb, and so it's going to force Cherry to have to hit Knockoff, finally removing Rotom's Scarf, which allows Rotom to Volt Switch out into Clefable. This is a dangerous decision, but it pays off because the Tentacruel goes for a flip turn instead of a Sludge Bomb. So as a result, Latios goes right back out in Tent. Clef's able to get off a Wish. And at this point, it's only a matter of time before Clefable's going to be able to break down this Coral. We know that this thing is armed with Calm Mind, and because of Magic Guard, it's not going to take any poison damage when it does get poisoned. So Latios trying to recover up in front of this thing. Clef goes for a Calm Mind. Latios goes into Tentacruel with the intent to sack it, but Tentacruel does live the Moonblast, so it's able to get off a Haze and force Clef back to neutral before going down to another Moonblast. So Latios comes back in, goes straight for the Psychic Noise, which does a healthy 42%. Clefable does go for the right move, gets off the Calm Mind. Second Psychic Noise does 29%. Moonblast not enough to kill, but it does get the drop. And so you see the Psychic Noise does 22%. Clefable lives at 1 to take game 2. Clefagency plays in full effect. We move to game 3. Houndstone coming in on Terrakion, and Fluffy does not stop Stone Edge from getting the 2-hit KO. Then you move to turn 10. Terrakion comes back in after a Tentacruel flip turn. Clefable puts his Calm Mind. We've got to make a decision. Keg stays in and it pays off. Stone Edge misses. Moonblast rings true. And so it's looking like another down to the wire game. Clefable Thunderbolt at +1, not enough to KO the Tentacruel, but turn 13, Keg makes a mistake, presses Wish instead of going for the KO. And so as a result, Clefable's got to leave, and at this point is effectively a sack. Excadrill gets the KO on Tentacruel, but that just lets Pulp come back in and get off a fast Will-O-Wisp to burn Excadrill and effectively make this a 4-3 game. Turn 20, Pulp comes back in on a Rotom Willow, which means that we're once again put in a tough situation. If you're Hau'oli, Clef has to get sacked due to a Shadow Ball, which means that Excadrill is going to come out here, but knowing that this thing is burned means it's not really doing much of anything, and it doesn't even scare out Cherry, who calls Keg's bluff and takes out Rotom Heat. And so now Keldor's going to have to come in and take some Shadow Ball chips as well before finally taking Dragapult out of the game. But at this point, it's a very clear Rose Tower advantage. Latios comes in, gets the Revenge KO with that Psychic Noise. And so T-Tar, already all the way down to 14%, is going to have to come in. But that doesn't mean anything, knowing how much slower it is than Latios. So it goes down to a Surf. And a burned Excadrill, even at +2, can't even hope to break through a Latios. So even though that red card does come out and force it through, it's not going to matter. There's a Skarmory with a Rocky Helmet in the back waiting for that Iron Head. And so Rose Tower is able to pick up the 2-1 victory. Latios 5 KOs, 9 points. The Copperajahs moved to 9-4. Good effort from Keg in his first game back in the NWBA, but unfortunately, it is a loss as Hau'oli falls to 2-10 on the season. Big Bluff and Anastar 4-9 versus 5-7. Both teams looking for playoff positioning in that crowded Ruby League wildcard picture. Out the gate, Tornadus Theory and Volt Switch is out on the Torkoal, which decides to put up rocks. Donphan comes in on Arcanine H and easily takes the head smash before Anastar goes into Gliscor. But Donphan has Ice Shard at the ready, a very good counterplay here coming out from Big Bluff, and with no real switch-ins to Rocks plus Ice Shard, Thunderstarian gets sacked very early to put this in Big Bluff's favor out the gate. Chandelure Terra Grasses goes for a Shadow Ball, does a nice healthy chunk to the Azumarill, and then because it's faster, switches up to Energy Ball to take the KO and even up the game. But Walking Wake in the Sun has zero answers. Gliscor immediately goes down to a Draco Meteor to at least try to get this thing weaker, which allows Slowking G to come in after the sun goes down. Torkoal comes back in to put the sun back up. Slowking G sets up a Future Sight, and then Chilly Receptions to block out the sun with the snow brings Chandelure right back in on the Will-O-Wisp on top of it, so now Chandelure has that Flash Fire boost, and there's no way that Blaziken can come in and take a Shadow Ball plus a Future Sight, and so Anastar evens it up 4-4. Torkoal comes back out, but Shadow Ball is doing a lot to anything that comes in, and so Torkoal just tries to get a little bit of chip, but doesn't want to go down just yet, wants to try to keep the sun up for as long as possible for Walking Wake. But at this point, Anastar's playing with house money, stays in on the Hydro Steam, gets the KO with the Shadow Ball, before finally going down to an Espeon Psyshock on turn 15. So Arcanine H comes back in, Torkoal comes in to get sacked to the Flare Blitz, which is even stronger thanks to the sun, so it's up to Donphan, which does in fact live the Flare Blitz, because the Arcanine H is not Choice Band, it's Choice Scarf. So in comes Lucario, picks up that KO with the extreme speed, so it's down to just Espeon. But the Lucario does not remember that the Espeon is Terra Psychic, so Psyshock immediately takes out Lucario. And while it's not enough to take out the Slowking G, even a critical hit from the Sludge Bomb is not enough to take out the Espeon, and so Big Bluff capitalizes off that mistake to take game 1. We move to game 2. Walking Wake comes in on an Earthquake. You see that it's booster special attack, so we already know that nothing can really sit in front of this thing. Not even a Slowking G, which takes 66% from a Hydro Steam. So Anastar goes ahead, lets it go, knowing that they're going to have to play on the back foot for a lot of this set. Arcanine H gets the KO because it is scarfed on that Walking Wake, so now Big Bluff knows that as well. Gliscor comes in, but Big Bluff reads that, goes for another Ice Shard, and so Gliscor is going to have to go down to Donphan here. Big Bluff making some very crucial plays here at very crucial junctures. Chandelure comes in, does not pick up the KO with the Energy Ball. Of course, Donphan has Sturdy, but even then, revealing its Assault Vest being able to live a Chandelure Energy Ball like that. So Torkoal comes down after Donphan gets KO'd, and because it comes in at full, it's able to take care of the Chandelure after a couple of rapid spins and still has HP left over. And so, Arcanine H has to come back in, gets the KO with the Flare Blitz, 3-3 count. Azumarill comes in, something's gonna have to take an Aqua Jet, which Lucario does. And so now Espeon comes in, but Anastar makes the correct call, goes immediately for the extreme speed, and then goes for it again, gets the roll, takes out the Espeon, and so now Anastar takes the lead back. Lucario cuts its losses, just tries to get some chip on Azumarill, but crucially Azumarill misses the play rough, and so now Anastar is playing with house money, gets another good quarter of HP off Azumarill, which misses play rough again! And so now Anastar is able to take Azumarill all the way down to 21% before finally finding the KO on Lucario. But at this point, Thunderstream is able to pick up the KO with the Thunderbolt, and so it's down to just Blaziken. Can Blaziken hold out long enough to pick up the speed boost it needs to win the set? The answer is no, it does not get the second Protect. And so while it does pick up the KO on Thunderstream with the Flare Blitz, it's too much recoil, goes down, and so we move to game 3. Slowking G and Espeon are the leads, and right out the gate, Big Bluff looking to swing for the fences, goes immediately for that Terra Psychic Psyshock, but does not prove to be beneficial, because just a few turns later, Chandelure comes in on Rocks, Espeon comes in and gets Shadow Balled for its trouble immediately, Oko. And so Walking Wake's gonna have to come in retaliation. And we already know that there's nothing that can really stand in front of a Walking Wake's Draco Meteor in the sun. So Slowking G goes down, Chandelure comes back out, immediately Terragrasses to take advantage of the incoming Hydro Steam, which does come out, gets good chip with the Shadow Ball. Before the Walking Wake reveals that it's flip turn, we did see that it has lefties. Not really sure what that fourth move was going to be, but you see the flip turn. But Torkoal can't take 2 Shadow Balls, and so now the sun is going to go down after just one more turn. So Anstar decides to let Chandelure go to the Draco Meteor, and we play 4-4, no sun up for the remainder of game 3. Scarf Arcanine comes in, but Flare guesses wrong, presses Head Smash. Donphan's able to come in, knocks off the Lucario's Life Orb, so this thing isn't doing nearly enough damage, and because of that, Donphan being AV easily takes the Aura Sphere before sending Lucario packing with an Earthquake. So Thunder's Theory has to come in, and you know it's going to take a lot to the Ice Shard, and it doesn't have Grass Knot, it has Focus Blast, which does not pick up the KO. And so Donphan is able to get a lot of extra chip on this Arcanine H, which misses the Head Smash just for good measure, before finally picking up the KO on turn 16, but at this point everything is sufficiently whittled down for Azumarill to come in, Aqua Jet and clean up, takes care of the Arcanine. Thundurus doesn't have boots, and Anastar concedes the game, and so Big Bluff picks up a huge win over their Ruby League rivals 2-1, moves to 4-9 to end week 4. Walking Wake and Donphan both putting up 4 KOs in the absolutely massive win. And for Anastar, who's normally one of Saturday's strongest soldiers, they fall to 1-4 on the day in Season 8. Anastar would then immediately have to pick up the pieces and go to battle with the 4-9 Kitakami Kyodai. Same situation, both teams looking for playoff positioning in that crowded Ruby League wildcard race. Out the gate, Duraludon getting off some big chip on turn 11 on the Goodra, which would eventually lead to the first KO of the match when Goodra tries to take care of Duraludon but EQs into a Serena, who gets the KO with that rapid spin. Turn 20, Shaman looking for an Earth Power on Skeledirge, whiffs as Iron Nucleus comes in, but thinks that Terra Fairy easily lives the Hydro Pump thanks to being Assault Vest and gets off a lot of damage with that Dazzling Gleam. So Mole's gonna have to come in, reveals that it is also AV, and then the Shaman shows that it's actually Giga Drain and not Seed Flare. So Aloma Mola not taking too much damage from this Shaman, but you still have to dance around this thing's coverage. And Skeledirge takes an Earth Power and then gets the Spadef drop, so not able to do too much of the Shaman, and eventually is going to have to go down to an Earth Power. This brings Ogerpon Cornerstone in, which gets the KO with the Ivy Cudgel, and with this thing being the fastest thing on the field, it's going to be a team wrecker. Arcanine H goes down because it was trying to bluff the Scarf. CJ calls out the bluff. Fortress takes a lot, revealing that it is in fact light play screens, but it's not going to matter if it goes down to a second Ivy Cudgel. And eventually on turn 37, Anstar tries to turn things around, gets the KO on Duraludon with that Glasgow Earthquake. This brings in Serena. Glasgow protects, scouting for that triple axle, which Serena does in fact have, so it's going to be very tricky trying to navigate the end game here. Glasgow at the very least is faster, so gets off a lot of damage with the U-turn. Greninja comes in, takes one axle, but then Serena Terra poisons to take little damage from that Greninja U-turn and then pick up the KO on Gliscor with the triple axle. So Greninja, the only one left, gets the KO with the surface that it is Battle Bond. You see that it's also Boots, so it's not too strong. So it's got to go for Dark Pulse Punches on Alola Mola, and while Mola does miss the first play rough, the Dark Pulse does not flinch. Mola picks up that KO with the second play rough, and Kitakami takes game 1. On to game 2, we move all the way to turn 15. Shaman once again Trailblaze as the fourth move on the AV set, gets another Spadef drop on the Skeledirge, and then very crucially on turn 17, once the light screen goes down, gets up another Spadef drop on the Earth Power. And so now, Skeledirge is at a crossroads, has to make a decision. Kitakami takes it out, brings Jugulus in. Once again, blocks the Earth Power, but because of the Trailblaze, it's slower after having already burned its booster and goes down to a Dazzling Gleam. But then Alomomo reveals Mirror Coat as the fourth move. Great use of Assault Vest technology coming out from Kitakami. Arcanine H picks up the KO on Skeledirge on turn 21, but that just brings Ogerpon back in. But a bit of a misplay here from the Ogerpon, going for the Power Whip instead of immediately going for an Ivy Cudgel, which is going to allow Fortress to put up a Reflect. And so Ogerpon's going to go for the SD here. Arcanine H comes in, knows that it can only get a little bit of chip because it's not going to be able to live in Ivy Cudgel at +2, even behind a Reflect. So Greninja comes in, it can outspeed, forces Ogerpon out, U-turns out into Goodra, and gets off the big knockoff on that Alomomo. So now it's not going to be able to live the incoming Greninja moves that easily. And then misses a player for good measure as Goodra goes for the Dragon Tail, which brings Ogerpon right back in. But because the Fortress is in fact light play, that means her Reflect is still up. Goodra gets off some big damage with the Power Whip, and then lives the next play rough to pick up the KO with the Earthquake. So now Serena's gonna have to come in, pick up the KO on Goodra with the Rapid Spin. We're back to a 3-3 game. Serena Terra Poisons, Greninja expects it, goes straight for the Dark Pulse, gets the big flinch, and then Flare parlays that luck into a U-turn into Fortress to try to get those screens back up. So, Kitakami recognizes this, knocks off the light play after getting up to +2, and then brings in Mola, expecting Fortress to Volt Switch out, which it does. Glasgow comes in, puts up rocks. Mola goes for the flip turn though, so Greninja's able to stick around, which means that now Duraludon is going to have to get sacked to this Gliscor, goes down to the Earthquake, and because Serena swapped out, it doesn't have the speed boost anymore. Terra Poison means that it's not going to live a Gliscor EQ, and so it's all up to Alomomo with no Assault Vest to get the job done. Takes only 28 from the Earthquake, but it's not going to be able to do anything to a Gliscor with Zen Headbutt as its main attacking move. So we move to game 3, Ogerpon Cornerstone the lead, and Kitakami wants to end the game right now. Immediately gets up a +4 with a couple of Swords Dances. Fortress has to get out of dodge as soon as possible. Shaman the only thing that can sit in front of an Ivy Cudgel, which does not come out on the first turn, which means Shaman's able to get some good HP back with the Giga Drain. Goes for a Trailblaze, which means it's going to outspeed the Ogerpon on turn 5. And while Giga Drain does not get the KO, it does put Cornerstone into enough of a range for something to take care of it. Turn 15, Serena gets up to +3 on the speed, just trying to outspeed whatever comes in. But Arcanine H behind screens means that it's taking nothing from a Power Whip and easily taking care of Serena with the Head Smash. So Cornerstone comes back in to force a KO. Goodra goes down after a couple of Ivy Cudgels. Reflect is now down. Light Screen is now down. Greninja comes in. Jugulus comes in expecting a U-turn, which does happen. And a Jugulus with booster speed is a potential mon. But what happens when it meets that potential? Heat Wave lands on the Fortress. Hydro Pump lands on the Gliscor. And so now Greninja's going to have to come in. And Focus Blast lands as well. CJ's luck finally reverts back to something positive, and even though the Hydro Pump misses on the next turn and Jug goes down to a Head Smash, it's not going to matter if Ogerpon can clean up the game with an Ivy Cudgel anyway. And so Kitakami with a huge win over Anastar, 7 KOs from the hand of Cornerstone, another 4 from Iron Jugulus, and Kitakami picks up a huge win on Saturday night to bring both teams to 5-9 in that heated Ruby League race. Lavender Town dismantles Kitakami on prime time to move to 11-1 behind the Cosmos 7 points. Skypillar and Lavender Town go down to the wire, but Skypillar picks up the huge victory behind as of 16-point performance, including a struggle kill to hit the buzzer beater in game 2. Rose Tower takes care of Koroway in a very closely fought set. Latios 9 points in a close fought victory for its new franchise over a tough team. Spear Pillar continues to extend their lead over the Sapphire League after taking out Humalao in a very close 2-1 set. Humalao takes care of Goldenrod to get the sweep on them. Jolteon, a massive performance, 16 total points as Kobe beats Dom once again. Hearthome picks up a massive victory over the struggling Mount Steel Mawals. Yanmega 11 total points, and Infernape cleaning up in Game 3 for the massive win for the Sapphire League playoff race. Humalao continues their winning ways, taking down Castelia City by a score of 2-1. Blissey puts up 10 total points as the swim team is able to dismantle the Mammoth Swine's very tough defense. Literal picks up their second win of the season after taking down Castelia City. Charles Palde and Aqua, a huge 14-point performance in the very important victory. Hau'oli gets their first win with Keg as their new GM, taking down the Big Bluff by a score of 2-1. Lander Assyrian puts up 9 points, and Bandit T-Tar takes care of the rest in Game 3 to get the Hydras back in the playoff race. Goldenrod takes out Hearthome 2-0 to tie the season series. Iron Crown 10 points, finally putting in a big performance for its team. So let's go ahead now and roll into this week's league coverage. There have been some very fascinating developments as far as the standings goes, but we also have a new segment to showcase after the stats leaderboard section that we think is very appropriate to talk about heading into the final stretch of the season. If you look strictly at where the teams are located in the Ruby League standings, you'd think that not a single thing has changed. Every team is exactly where they were last week. But if you look at the records, you will realize something ominous is brewing in Ruby League. Lavender Town, Rose Tower, and Sky Pillar all still remain in the top 3 spots. However, the race has gotten a little bit tighter after Sky Pillar went 3-0 in the week, including beating both Lavender Town and Rose Tower. Obviously, Lavender Town still has a big advantage on their 2 rivals, but there's a little bit more room for something to happen in that top 3. As far as the rest of the Ruby League, it is now an absolute brawl for the wild card spots. Anastar, Big Bluff, Koroway, and Kitakami all sitting at 5-9, and Hau'oli, after their 2-1 week at the hands of Keg, are 4-10, just a single game back. So you're talking about 5 teams in the Ruby League all competing for the wild card. We've never seen the standings look quite like this after 4 weeks. It is going to be fascinating to see who emerges as those 2 wild card teams in the Ruby League. And of course, there is still just enough time, although not a lot of space, for Rose Tower or Sky Pillar to somehow drop and join that dreaded wild card race. And if you look at the Sapphire side, things feel a little bit more restrained and yet still quite similar to how the Ruby League looks. The top 3 dogs are still the top 3 dogs. Spear Pillar, Mauville, and Humalao sitting at 1, 2, 3 respectively. A little bit of distance between Humalao and the top 2 now after Humalao went 2-1 as opposed to 3-0 like the other top contenders. But that's fine because there is a pretty sizable gap between Humalao and the rest of the field. Goldenrod and Mount Steel swap places, so now Goldenrod occupies the 4. Neither had a great week, but Mount Steel, as you see, went winless, so their losing streak now sits at 5. Really stumbling here. At one point, they were above Humalao in the standings. Now, suddenly, just 1 game ahead of Hearthome, sitting at the 6, who did get a head-to-head win over Mount Steel to make that all the more interesting. Castelia City drops down to the 7. Another winless week, so they sit at 6 straight losses and have dropped all the way down. Still very much in contention, but the vibes are atrocious right now. And then you see Littleroot actually went 2-1 on the week. 3-11, still the bottom of the Sapphire League standings, but now suddenly dreams of making the wild card aren't so far-fetched for the Time Zone Bandits after all. With all the craziness that is occurring in the standings, it makes sense that we've seen the most movement we've ever seen in a single week of the power rankings. We have a new #1 Spear Pillar ascends to the top spot. They have the best record in the league, of course. Sapphire Ribbon loading, that is the question for the Spear Pillar stratagems, sitting at 13-1. A 20-win season is very much possible for them. And with another 4-0 week, they can damn near clinch the Sapphire Ribbon right then and there. Lavender Town moves down just 1 spot, still sitting pretty. They're having a fantastic season, and yeah, losing to another top contender in the Ruby League isn't the greatest thing in the world, but it doesn't matter if you take care of business elsewhere, which Lavender Town has continued to do, which is why they're still the top team in the Ruby League. Mauville jumps up 1 spot to the #3, and shout out to Iron Valiant. That thing has put in an absolutely massive amount of work for the Mimikyu, and we would like to think, so long as it doesn't get banned, it's going to continue to help elevate this team into one of the best teams in the NWBA, which they're already there, but there's still a little bit more room to go. Rose Tower drops down 1 spot, but they're still sitting very well. They're still the second best team in the Ruby League standings wise. And super shout out Latios, because having such a disgustingly strong Terra Captain is a luxury that not many teams can afford without compromising other parts of the roster. But we've already talked about how good Meowscarada and Dragapult is for Rose Tower. Why not add a 3rd head to that dragon? Sky Pillar moves up 1 spot to #5, making huge statement. After week 3, we said this team is at a bit of a crossroads. They need to figure out what they want to do for the season going forward, and they answered that question by beating both Rose Tower and Lavender Town in a single week. So clearly, this is a team that is really, truly ready to contend for a championship. Humalau takes their place, dropping down just 1 spot to #6. Just need tune-ups. Like we said, Humalau is sitting very pretty. We know what Kobe is capable of. The fact that they are currently occupying a top 3 spot means that they are right where they need to be. Just got to make those necessary adjustments heading into the playoffs, which is right around the corner. Goldenrod actually moves up 2 spots to the #7 despite their relatively poor week, but that's more of a sign of just how big of a chasm there is between the top 6 and the rest of the league. Importantly for Goldenrod, they still control their own destiny. That's the statement that needs to be made here. While the season hasn't really gone as well as Dom has hoped, they're still the #4 in the Sapphire League right now, which means that they can decide what the rest of their season looks like. Mount still drops 1 spot down to #8, and they need a turnaround badly. At one point in time, they were above Humalau in the standings. Now you're talking about they're just 1 set away from dropping out of the wildcard picture entirely. That's no good. Mount still needs a turnaround as soon as they possibly can. Big Buck moves up 1 spot to #9, but in a reversal of last week's statement, maybe start panicking. Panicking might not be the word, but the pressure is on. The heat is really getting to some of these Ruby League teams. Big Buff needs to capitalize on that as soon as they possibly can. This team was 4-3 before Keith needed that break before the break. So we know that there's a team that could very well have a winning record if things were different, but things aren't different. Might be time to start making them different. Anastar, after their poor week, drops down 2 spots to #10. Look towards Lucario. Once again, we've got a team that's got a really strong Pokemon. In Anastar's case, a Terra Captain that doesn't really get used that often, and maybe that is the secret to turn this around for Anastar. Granted, they're not that far away from 500, but Terra Captain Lucario might be the piece that they need to start leaning on in order to really make that turnaround happen. Hearthome is the only team that retains their spot from the previous week, still sitting at #11. Make something shake. Some way, somehow, whether that is through utilizing Mew more or making a trade or a free agency move, because this is one of the few teams that have not done a single roster transaction since the beginning of the season. But something's got to change for Hearthome. The way things are going, It's not working out for the Heaters, and we know that Ball Heat is better than this, in that his teams typically perform better, and maybe that's the issue at play here. Korway, Kitakami, Hau'oli, and Littleroot all move up a single spot. Korway, the big statement is find that upset some way, somehow. They need a big win on their resume to instill confidence to make that playoff push. They do have some top dogs on the list for the schedule. We'll get into that a little bit later, but Korway has some opportunities coming up. For Kitakami, pull no punches. They've leaned all in on this electric terrain. They've got to continue to not care what the outsiders say, block out the outside noise, focus on what they have built, and lean all into that, because that is going to be the difference between them making the playoffs and not. For Hau'oli, revival of Kaskarafa. They went 2-1 in their first week under Keg's ownership. Could we see a similar turnaround to what we saw from the Cyndaquils in Season 6? Only time will tell. For Littleroot, real momentum building. This team has been down in the dumps for so long, and after going 2-1 in Week 4, suddenly, Time Zone Bandits have something going here. Can they continue to capitalize off of that? We will see, but this feels a lot more real than just a flash in the pan. Castelia City, who has now lost 6 in a row, drops all the way down to the bottom spot in the power rankings. The season is slipping away from the Mammoth Swines. In a similar case to Hardhome, we think something needs to change roster-wise, but we've talked about at length how the offense has not really met the defense here, and a turnaround is going to have to happen fast if the Mammoth Swines want any chance of salvaging what they have put together thus far and getting right back into that playoff hunt. The stats leaderboard for Week 4 tells us that this was the most productive week of Season 8 as far as the league leaders were concerned. Jolteon of Himmalao led all mons with 19 KOs, not just on the week, but on the season. 19 is the Season 8 record for most KOs in a week. We will see if a mon later on the season gets to 20, but for the time being, Jolteon has that record with 19. Tornado Syrian of Spear Pillar comes in second with 16. Latios of Rose Tower comes in third with 15. Azov of Sky Pillar with 14, good for fourth. And then Veluza of Littleroot coming in fifth with 11. Blackmark Dusk once again leads all mons in assists over the week, putting up another 8. Rhyperior of Himmalao coming in second with 7, as well as Torkoal of Big Bluff, so there's a tie there. Gligar of Mount Steel coming in with 5, good enough for fourth. And then a host of mons sitting at just 4 assists, including Blissey of Himmalao, Heatran of Sky Pillar, Hippowdon of Lavender Town, and both Landorus Syrian and Tyranitar of Hau'oli. Jolteon was also the points leader this week with 37. That is also a Season 8 record. Tornado Syrian putting up 31, good for second. Azul from Sky Pillar once again with 28, good for third. Latios in fourth with 26. And then Veluza again with 22. And speaking of Veluza, it got those KOs and those points in just a single set of play. So it's 11 points per game over that one set, is the most on the week. Decidueye of Sky Pillar posting 9 points per game, getting that in exactly one game. But over here, you know, we don't discriminate on how many games you play in a week, as long as you put up some numbers. So Decidueye, good for second points per game on the week. Tornado's back again, this time with 6.2 points per game, that's good for third. Golden Goal of Malville putting up a good week with 6, good for fourth. And then Tauros Paldean Aqua, also of Littleroot, with 4.67. So Veluza and Tauros Paldean Aqua both showed out for Littleroot, would explain their great week. Veluza, of course, also being the KOs per game leader on the week with 5.5. Decidueye coming in second with 4. Tornadus Therian coming in third with 3.2. Golden Go in fourth with a flat 3. And then Tauros Paldean Aqua rounding that out with 2.33 KOs per game. Longtime NWBA fans will recognize this graphic. It's the return of the MVP ladder as we wind down the regular season and move closer to the playoffs. We discuss which mons are most likely to win the league's most coveted awards, the MVP. In the Ruby League, Azelf is currently number 1 on that ladder. Makes sense, leads the league in KOs and total points. Far and away the most productive mon on Sky Pillar's roster, so it makes sense that it's number 1 in the Ruby League as far as MVP voting would likely be concerned. Latios currently sits at number 2, very similar case, 2nd in total KOs and top 10 in total points. But for Latios, the numbers aren't as gaudy, and there are other teammates on that team that are a little bit more offensively inclined as far as the numbers are concerned. Polt and Meowscarada have been very productive this season, so Latios is a little bit behind as well. Meloetta of Corway actually coming in at number 3. This might be a bit of a surprise to a lot of people, but Meloetta is the most productive member on Corway's roster, and even though this team is 5-9, does that not in fact mean that Meloetta is even more valuable? Because if you were to take that mon off the roster, this team might be even lower in the standings than they are currently. So Meloetta, more of a you gotta watch the games type of mon, but still deserving on the MVP ladder. Thunderous Therian coming in at 4th for Anastar. Similar case as Meloetta. Numbers aren't as gaudy, which is a bit of a disappointment considering that Thunderous Therian was extremely productive in the first half of the season. Didn't have a great week 4, but still very productive numbers. And same case, the most productive mon on a team that is currently sitting at 5-9, so they need every amount of help they can get. And then coming in number 5 in the league is Necrozma of Lavender Town. This is a pretty interesting predicament that happens a lot with the absolute top teams in the league. When you have so many different mons that put so much work that you're gonna run into an issue where they kind of cannibalize each other's votes in different awards categories. And Lavender Town kind of has that issue. Necrozma is the most productive member on that roster, and yet there are still other mons like Oricorio Pow that are very good, and then you can't overwrite the impact that defensive stalwarts have on a team like this. So Necrozma is the most productive member on this team and has the best numbers because it doesn't get to play that often, but as a result, it's kind of hard to argue this mon as more valuable than any of the mons above it. Over in the Sapphire League, the top contender is Lycanroc Dusk of Mauville. The absolute double-double demon that it is already leads the league in total assists, having hit 31, and is not too far away from hitting 30 KOs as well. We might be looking at the first 40-40 mon in NWBA history. And it makes sense that it's 2nd in total points right now. So Lycanroc Dusk has been able to get it done both offensively and utility-wise for a very good team. So it makes sense that it sits at the top of the Sapphire ladder. Jolteon comes in 2nd for Humalao, top 5 in points, top 5 in KOs as well. Like, this mon is just very offensively threatening. It has been for Humalao for the past few weeks. It just got off of winning Pokemon of the Week. And so as a result, it makes sense that that's going to be number 2 on the ladder, just a little bit behind Lycanroc Dusk. And if it continues to be the offensive engine for Humalao, Jolteon can very easily move into the number 1 spot. At spots 3 and 4 is an interesting concept. You've got teammates, Tornadus Therian and Darkrai. For the same reason that Necrozma isn't higher on the ladder, because its teammates kind of cannibalize its votes, we have a similar issue for Spirit Parallor's Twin Towers. Both mons are top 5 in KOs and top 5 in points, but if there are 2 mons on the roster that are this productive, can you really say either one is more valuable than the other? And can you really say they're more valuable than some of the other top dogs in the NWBA when a lot of those mons are running solo? So as a result, Tornadus Therian and Darkrai still very good, still very productive, and one or both of them could move up the ladder if their production continues, but as it currently stands, hard to argue against Lycanroc Dusk or Jolteon in favor of either of those two. And then coming in 5th, currently you got Latios of Mount Steel. Similar case to Thunderous Therian, where this mon's numbers in the first half of the season were absolutely gaudy. Has fallen off the pace quite a bit, but still the most productive member on a team that is right in the thick of the wildcard race. And so it, as you've seen with all the other mons, makes a lot of sense why Latios is down here. And if Mount Steel can turn it around, it will likely be off the back of Latias, and truthfully, Latias probably has the best chance of any Mon currently on the top 5 of either ladder to move on. Your Ruby League Pokemon of the week is Azelf of the Sky Pillar Delta Dragons. 14 KOs was 4th in the NWBA, 28 points was 3rd in the NWBA. Its 4.0 points per game and 2.0 KOs per game were both 2nd in the entire Sapphire League. It was an absolutely massive week for Sky Pillar, went 3-0, including wins over the 2 teams in the Ruby League above them in the standings. And a big reason why is Azelf. It's been a counter scarfer. It's been a very strong choice option for the Delta Dragons all season, and it finally pays off in a big way, playing all 3 sets and putting in work in all 3 of them. Azelf may very well be on its way to its first ever MVP award if it continues to operate at such a high pace. After giving Marvel some shine in Week 3, Humalao returned with a vengeance to claim their 3rd Pokemon of the Week award between 3 distinct Mons. This time it's Jolteon, 19 KOs and 37 points. Both led the league not only, but also set records for the most KOs and points in a single week in the entirety of Season 8. 4.1 points per game and 2.1 KOs per game were both 5th in the Sapphire League. While Humalao normally profiles as a rain team, that's what they look like on paper, Jolteon has been so effective even outside of it. Very strong Terra Captain, speed tier fantastic. While Jolteon has won Pokemon of the Week in the past, we don't think anyone expected this type of performance out from one of the evolutions, but very much well deserved regardless.
Boy, it's out the mud. We got
ZU moment of the week.
What the fuck was that?
You're smoking dust.
Your Week 4 ZU moment of the week is actually a double header, both featuring one Keg FM. We know this guy to be a shit poster. What we didn't expect is the guy to be a scumbag. We take you to Hau'oli versus Anastar Game 1. As you see, it comes down to the wire, but Gliscor simply does not have the PP to beat out the Rotom Heap, and so Hau'oli takes the first game. We head into Game 2, where you see that Anastar made quite a few swaps, too many to be legal. Accidentally brought the wrong team. Not a big deal. People let that slide all the time. Not Keg. Went ahead and took that game right from Flair's nose. And for what it's worth, this is completely legal. So this ZU Moment of the Week really is more on Flair than it is on Keg. That's on Flair. Gotta pay more attention. Gotta make sure you're loading up the right team. And it's unfortunate that you dropped a very important set that way, but that's how it goes in the NWBA. But like we said, not the only one. We move to Hau'oli versus Big Bluff. Out the gate, you see Venusaur comes out and it's ready to get things popping. Terra Grass's Solar Beam, which is already crazy in and of itself. Except that Venusaur is not actually Terra Grass. Yes, in back-to-back sets, these moments were about maybe 5 minutes apart. Not only does Hau'oli get a free set on Anastar, they get a free Game 1 against Big Bluff. Both teams in playoff position need every single win that they can get, and both of them failed the most routine spot checks possible. And for Keg, of all players to capitalize off that, someone who literally rejoined the league in the middle of the week and then just starts stealing wins from people. No type of shame, no sense of honor. Just robbing people in broad daylight. Somebody has to put a stop to this man. Somebody, anyone, please, if you're out there and you can handle dealing with this, I can't even call him a person at this point. Somebody, anyone, please, we have to put a stop to this. We have to put an end to this menace. The sake of the league's integrity is on the line. Do you understand me? There's only so much more we can put up with this before something goes wrong. Something terrible. Please, I'm begging. We roll into what continues to be the albatross of Wonder Room, the free agency and trade section. And with the trade deadline now behind us, teams can only make free agency moves for the remainder of the season. And that really actually means only in week 5. That being said, because it was the week of the trade deadline, we got a ton of trades. This was maybe the single most hectic week of free agency in NWBA history, and there is a ton of things to cover. 29 total moves were made over the course of week 4, the most in a single week in NWBA history. And we start with Hau'oli, which was given a freebie, considering that Keg was taking over for the departed Danchi. Releases Toxtricity to sign Oricorio-Sensu, figure that Oricorio-Sensu was a little bit more threatening out the box thanks to its speed tier. And of course, we've seen what Oricorio can get up to with those Quiver Dance shenanigans. And because both Mons are RU, Oricorio-Sensu becomes a Terra Captain in what else but Ground and Fairy, the same two types we've seen be very successful for the other two Oricorio that are already in the league. Hollywood also released Electrode H, but did not play any games under Danchi, to sign Hoopa, giving it Fighting and Ghost as Terra options. Make sense, Fighting a good defensive typing for Hoopa, and also to boost those Focus Blasts, and then Ghost because Shab Statle Ball boost, why the hell not? Anastar releases Whimsicott to sign Glastrier, figures that if we're going to be shuffling around PUs, we might as well shuffle around something that can benefit from both Chili Reception and Trick Room, something that Flare has done in the past. And so Glastrier comes aboard with typings in Water and Fairy as a Terra Captain for the team. Kitakami underwent a ton of change, basically completely tore down the roster. Starting with releasing Pincursion, never really fully leaned into the electric terrain the way we thought they would, and signs Bastiodon of all Pokemon, making it a Terra Captain in typing with Fighting and Ghost. Ghost at the very least, a good defensive typing, and then Fighting to boost body press, because Bastiodon can at the very least do that. Interesting to see what the thought process was here, but regardless, Bastiodon rostered by Kitakami. And then somehow an even more crazy decision, Spear Pillar signing Shinx. Let's go for what it is. This is a troll. This is Blades being cheeky and deciding, hey, I'm doing so well already, I'm gonna go ahead and punch my ticket to the finals and a Sapphire League ribbon, so we can go ahead and give Shinx an accolade by the time this is all said and done. So, well played. The team has one loss up to this point in the season. Why not sign your favorite PU to flex on everybody else? The first of 5 trades on the week starts with Kitakami continuing the roster overhaul, trading away Rabambi to Big Bluff for Deoxys Defense. Kitakami undergoing a lot of change, but on paper Rabambi was the odd man out on a team that was going to run electric terrain, which already had a way of controlling the speed. While Big Bluff does not necessarily need a web setter on a Sun team, why not go all in on the hyper offensive approach? And for Deoxys Defense, which could have been a decent manual sunsetter, but not much else. At the very least, it will offer Kitakami a little bit more in the way of defense, being able to knock Mons off, put up hazards, and then teleport out into the next awaiting attacker. Following the trade, Kitakami would completely commit to rebuilding the entire roster, releasing Hawlucha, Duraludon, and Raikou-Alolan. This is big because Hawlucha and Raikou-Alolan were big parts of their potential electric terrain offense. So now they are really committing to rebuilding this thing. We just wish we knew what the hell they were building, because they then immediately dropped Bastiodon after just signing the thing to pick up regular Ninetales. So it appears that the pivot would be to a Sun team, which is possible even with another Sun team already existing in the league. And in acquiring Ninetales, they made it a Terra Captain with types in Grass and Ground. Both can be very good offensively for Alolan Ninetales, boosting Solar Beam and Scorching Sands respectively, but also just decent defensive types to have as well. Hau'oli would then make another move, releasing the recently signed Hoopa, looking at Kitakami and thinking, they signed him on just to drop it on its head. We think that's a good idea. And they opted to pick up Ice Cube, which we haven't seen since Keg himself employed it in Season 5. So Ice Cube gets another crack at joining the NWBA as a Terra Captain, being types in Water and Steel, both very good defensive types to be, in particular for an Ice type. Our first and only 2-for-2 trade of the season came when Spear Pillar sent Chansey and Shinx over to Humalau for Blissey and Rhyperior. In sending over Chansey, Humalau gets back their playoff riser from last season's championship run. Chansey was the finals MVP and put up major numbers for this team. So we've already seen what Kobe can do with Chansey on defense, and sends Blissey over to Spear Pillar to get Chansey, but doesn't have to rely on Eviolite and can be a little bit more threatening offensively if Blades is enough of a sicko to run Calm Mind Blissey stuff. Himala also sends over Rhyperior, meaning that Spear Pillar gets a nice ground type on their roster finally, and Himala is allowed to free up the Terra points that Rhyperior was taking up. Himala then did what any self-respecting GM would do, send Shinx right back to the daycare, dropping it and picking up Basculegion female. The entire league has been waiting on this maneuver, and Himala finally decided that the time was right to pick up the defending Sapphire League MVP and complete the Rain offense once and for all. Rose Tower continued to make moves, releasing Thunderous Eye for Sinistra. Figured that Sinistra offered a bit better of a setup potential than Thunderous Eye did, perhaps trying to lean more into the hyper offensive style. And then Kitakami made another signing without releasing any mon. Remember all the releases they did early in the week, and picked up Lilligant H, a mon that they used all the way back in Season 5 when they were still in New Barktown. Lilligant H, of course, a potential sweeper with Victory Dance, but also has Chlorophyll as an ability, so that proves that Kitakami is angling for some type of Sun offense. Rose Tower, no stranger to making big-time trades, sends Tinglu over to Hearthome in exchange for Iron Treads for the Heaters. We did say that something needed to shake on this roster, and so they decided to get one of the bulkiest Pokemon ever invented and a premier hazard stacker. Tinglu putting up both rocks and spikes, being able to whirlwind out as well, so that could prove to be a huge asset for Hearthome. And for Rose Tower, they get one of the best rapid spinners in the format, Iron Treads, a mon that can do a million different things, has knockoff, has rocks, has rapid spin, has volt switch, a bevy of utility moves, and can even be a decent setup sweeper. We'd like to think this is going to free up a lot of room for other mons on Rose Tower's roster to be as effective as they possibly can offensively. Rose Tower's next move would be to then finally release Skarmory, a mon that they have been trying to get off their roster for weeks, to sign Dunsparce. Dunsparce, at the very least, has a little bit more potential at being flat out annoying thanks to its ability to glare other Pokemon, and can be a bulky setup sweeper under the right circumstances. Goldenrod releases Empoleon, figures no, we want a different flavor of defensive water type, and figures that the Gastrodon flavor is pretty damn good. Gastrodon being signed as a Terra Captain with typings in Steel and Fairy, two of the best defensive types in the game, no need for further explanation. Castelia City gets rid of Suicune for Thunderous Eye. They have acknowledged that their offense hasn't really been making things work, and Suicune being a very bulky Calm Mind sweeper isn't what this team needs. They need something fast and hits harder. Thunderous Eye fulfilling that role perfectly. Corway then releases Iron Thorns to sign Uxie Iron Thorns, just a mod that they weren't really comfortable using, didn't really like the way it functioned. Uxie, one of the best utility users in Draft League, having access to a bevy of moves like Knockoff and U-Turn and Thunder Wave, and of course Memento, like we saw all the way back in Season 5. Uxie was also signed as a Terra Captain with types in Electric and Steel, two fantastic types to have for any Levitator. Kidakami then signs Araquanid, figures actually Webs in Sun sounds like a pretty good idea. They hooked up Big Bluff with Rabambi earlier and then decided, actually, we want a piece of that too, so they go ahead and pick up Araquanid. Mount Steel then releases Volcanion to sign the recently released Skarmory, so further bolstering their defenses, but at the same time getting rid of an absolute powerhouse in Volcanion. At the very least, Volcanion, one of those mons that kind of struggles due to the fact that it is weak to Stealth Rock's Skarmory. No such issue whatsoever with that. Yet another massive interleague trade. Anistar sends Gliscor over to Mount Steel in exchange for Plumeria. Anistar gets themselves a very good bulky water and fairy type, one of the best type combinations in the game, and gives themselves yet another option on both offense and defense. For Mount Steel, acquiring a very good defensive piece. Obviously, Toxic Heal makes Gliscor stick around so much longer than it has any right to. It can put up all sorts of hazards, be very annoying, knocking mons off and you turning out. What's interesting is that Mount Steel still employs Gligar, so there is a possibility that both Gligar and Gliscor could hit the field at the same time, meaning there's a very good possibility we could see a lot more offensive Gliscor in the future. The final trade of Season 8 takes place between who else but the two most frequent movers, Rose Tower and Spear Pillar, swapping over poison types in Tentacruel and Pheasantipity. For Rose Tower, it was more about getting a poison type that was a little bit more threatening defensively, which sounds crazy, but you have to remember Pheasantipity's Toxic Chain means even on Pokemon that would resist its fairy moves or poison moves or otherwise, if you are not poison or steel, you're going to get toxic eventually. As well as a mon that can stick around thanks to its ability to actually heal itself with a roost and still you turn out. For Spear Pillar, they get themselves a good low tier rapid spinner that very well can free up Great Tusk to be even more offensively potent than it already was, sticking with booster speed and being able to hit things right out the gate. For our final set of Free Agency moves, Lavender Town finally joins the fray, releasing Zapdos G for Suicune, a mon that Nico used back in Season 6, so he's very familiar with it. More importantly, Zapdos G just didn't really have any space to operate with Hippowdon and Rotom-Wash forming such a potent defensive duo. Zapdos G was never seeing the field as the third UU, so Lavender Town opts to get rid of it for a mon that at the very least has the potential to hit the field as a different tier. Rose Tower releases Comfey to sign Feraligatr, figures that Comfey just didn't have juice in the tank. Feraligatr at the very least, we know that this mon can be very threatening, saw it back in Season 6. Sheer Force Life Orb hits like a truck no matter which mon it's on. Castelia City releases Flamigo to give Duraludon another shot. Interesting to see how this one will work. Duraludon, a weird Pokemon in this environment, but at the very least can be somewhat bulky thanks to its good defensive typing and now access to Eviolite. And just for good measure, Duraludon was made a Terra Captain with typings in Ghost and Fairy. Fairy, of course, is Fairy type, but Ghost maybe wanting to use Duraludon as a spam blocker. Kidakami signs Scovillain as the final piece of their roster, a mon that we didn't even see back in Season 5 before the DLC drop. So Scovillain will be in the NWBA for the very first time, and Kidakami opts to make it a Terra Captain with types in Water and Fairy, not going with any stab or offensive options, so it will be interesting to see if Scovillain is actually used more defensively with moves like Leech Seed and Super Fang. Goldenrod releases Staraptor to sign Dreadnought, figured that Staraptor could only really do one of two things: be choice banded or be choice scarfed. Didn't really like either of those options. Dreadnought, at the very least, we've seen it function very well as a shell smasher in Season 7, so Goldenrod figures they want a piece of that. And then finally, Big Bluff goes from one chicken joint to the next, getting rid of Blaziken to sign Moltres. Moltres, while simultaneously still being very strong, provides Big Buff with something they did not have before now, and that's a mon that's not weak to ground moves, so a big defensive addition for the Bisharps who are trying to make a playoff push. Thankfully, we only have to see that segment one more time this season. And with that, we move into our final segment of the day. As always, the look ahead to the upcoming week and seeing what week 5 has in store for our competitors. As we take a look at the week 5 schedule, a lot of big time matchups. Anastar, currently sitting as the number 4 in the Ruby League, has to take on Rose Tower and Lavender Town, the top 2 teams in the Ruby League. Hau'oli in an even worse position. K coming back, looking to try to make a playoff run. It's gonna have to be facing Lavender Town, Sky Pillar, and Humalau, an absolutely brutal schedule, but not as brutal as Mount Steel, who's got to go through Humalau, Sky Pillar, Lavender Town, and Spear Pillar. You're talking 4 of the 6 best teams in the league in 1 week for a team that is currently on the downswing. Absolutely monstrous week ahead for the Mawwilds. You got some other very important matchups as well. Koroway and Kitakami, both 5 and 9, have to scrap it out. Heart Home, currently sitting outside of the playoff picture, has a big time matchup coming up against Smallville. And then we have to mention Goldenrod and Sky Pillar, the 2 commissioners of the league, getting to face off for the first time in NWBA history. Should be a very fun one. And coming up on Versus Seeker, we've got a triple header for the first time in a while. Kitakami and Big Bluff, 2 of those Ruby League 5 and 9ers, getting to go head to head. A huge matchup. Big Bluff won the first time around. What does Kitakami have as a response? Then you've got Rose Tower and Mauville, both currently the number 2 teams in their respective leagues. A potential finals preview, only time will tell, but it should be a huge matchup either way. And then Humalau and Koroway, an inter-league clash. Koroway needs every single win they can get in the book, upsets included. Can they find one against the defending champs, currently looking to continue to position themselves in a top 3 spot in the Sapphire League? Alright friends, that's going to wrap it up for another week of Wonder Room. Thank you all for watching. I've been your host, King Vasser. Coming up next, another triple header on Versus Seeker. Should be a fun night of action. We'll see you there.